But first, it's a cold case that has puzzled Olmsted County investigators for 3 decades. Tonight, those first on scene share how they still have hope for answers. Good evening and thank you for choosing ABC 6 News. I'm Laura Lee. In 1989, a man was found shot to death in the Zumbro River near Rock Dell. More than 30 years later, both former and current investigators are still hoping to catch whoever murdered Peter Kapitula. We do want to warn you, some of the images you're about to see might be disturbing. ABC 6 News reporter Talia Milovitz has tonight's top story.
As time goes by, people and places change. But the facts of a murder case from the late 1980s remain the same, still unsolved.
We're confident we got really close to the right people. The key was we didn't have any real good direct evidence. Everything was based on the testimony of people that were telling us the stories, and they were all criminals. And frankly, we couldn't make them credible enough to be able to trust their testimony in a court of law.
Former Olmsted County Sheriff Steve BORCHARDT was a captain in the detective division on June 4th, 1989. That's the day a boy and his mother were out fishing in the South Fork of the Zumbro River, where they found a body lying in a foot of water. He had been shot to death.
The victim is an adult male, probably young adult, rather large person. He was clothed in jeans, a cotton shirt, and wearing tennis shoes with no identification on him. At this point, we do not know who the victim is.
Retired Detective Dave RIKHUS, who was a patrol deputy with the Olmsted County Sheriff's Office at the time, was the first car on scene that day.
It didn't look like he was killed at the scene based on the evidence that we saw.
Because of the limited technology at the time, authorities struggled to identify the man and where he was killed.
If it were to happen today, even if you didn't have a DNA comparison, the real-time transfer of data is so much better now than it was. And so you could search databases nationwide for all kinds of different information.
The victim was unknown to law enforcement, and there were no local records of him.
When you can't identify the deceased or the victim in a homicide case for a couple of weeks, and it's a person that doesn't have any natural ties to the community, you're starting in a real bad place for your investigation. So it took a long time, and during that period of time, of course, a lot of evidence disappears, and the perpetrators of the event were able to change their stories or get together and make up the same story.
It took a few weeks for the sheriff's office to identify the man. Officials released this picture. He was Peter Kapitula, originally from New Hampshire.
Unfortunately, the kinds of friends that he had made since he had been in our area weren't really friends. They were all people that were engaged in illegal trafficking of mood-altering substances, narcotics, you name it, and lived generally a criminal lifestyle in our community.
Investigators were able to piece together that he was last seen at the Y Motel in Casson. That's now been converted into these apartment units.
The motive we came up with for the homicide was narcotics. One of the last people, a friend of his that we talked to that night there, or that day, they had worked on his truck, and when we interviewed him, Peter was going to meet somebody to buy some cocaine and wanted this guy to come along, and the guy kind of refused. He didn't want to be involved, and that's the last time anybody saw him that we're aware of. One of the people who was a person of interest has already passed away. The other ones are still in the area, as far as we know. We know from the scene that at least 2 people were there at the scene with the body.
As weeks turned into years, both BORCHARDT and RIKHUS were promoted. BORCHARDT was elected sheriff, RIKHUS was promoted to detective. After reviewing the case again, they sent it to the Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension's cold case unit. Since then, evidence has been submitted for testing multiple times, most recently in 2013.
The possibility is certainly there that somebody knows something, even just a little bit, that can help tip the scales a little bit more in our favor, and we can close this out with some sort of resolution. That possibility is there. Do I think it's likely? No.
Captain Scott Behrens with the Olmsted County Sheriff's Office says the last time any work was done on the case was around 2015, and it was unsuccessful.
What we do with our cold cases is we assign them to an investigator so that if something does come up, they do take it and they can work with it. In this day and age, for me to put a team on this is very difficult. We are very busy, as you guys can tell lately, with current crimes that we need to solve right away that are not taking anything away from the cold cases, but we need to work on what's going on here today.
He added that if new evidence came forward or if technology advanced in a way that would allow them to examine DNA further, they would consider resubmitting their evidence.
It's one of the things that no investigator wants to have a case unopened or not solved when they retire. So I know this is weighed heavy on some of the people that you talk to. But they did a good job. And they did what they needed to do at the time. And unfortunately, if people that are involved in this want to take it to their grave and they're determined to do that, and that's what they'll do.
And even though they interviewed thousands of people of interest over the years, BORCHARDT still holds out hope that someone, somewhere, could have the change of heart needed to help crack this case.
Well, it's active. There may not be a lot to do if you've exhausted all the physical evidence and it hasn't led you anyplace. But I think there's always a potential. As long as people are still alive that were around when it happened, there's a chance they could have changed and had a rebirth of spirit in their lives and be interested in doing the right thing at this time.
In Olmsted County, with photojournalist Brian Wise, Talia Milovitz, ABC 6 News.
If you have any information about this case, contact Crime Stoppers at the number right there on your screen, 1-800-222-TIPS.